Hello, travelers, and welcome back to the Ancient Art Podcast. I'm your host, Lucas Livingston. Pounding out number 2 in our list of the top 10 ancient Egyptian myths and misconceptions, we come to the myth that Cleopatra, Nefertiti, or whomever was or was not black, white, or some other racial profile. I reckon this episode may get more than its fair share of heated comments, judging by other episodes that touch on race in the ancient world, and we almost don't even have to belabor the point with this episode, but I composed the top 10 list well before I started podcasting it, so danggummit, this episode must be included. The ambiguity in the title is quite intentional. It reflects how both sides of the argument continue to be fought about the racial identity of various famous ancient people, most notably Cleopatra and Nefertiti. So you can just insert your own preferred individual or race in the title. And the fact that this issue resonates so gut-wrenchingly personally with some people betrays that the question is truly much more a reflection of contemporary society and racial identity rather than an historical question. As I put it back in episode 22, Nefertiti, Devonia Michael, blame it on the African diaspora, Western imperialism, or Ellis Island. But this obsession over whether the ancient Egyptians were black, white, Greek, Berber, Nilotic, or other is entirely a modern construction. Like America today, ancient Egypt was a very mixed population, and it was an immensely large nation stretching from the Mediterranean all the way to sub-Saharan Africa. One encounters significant genetic variation across this vast stretch of land and over the thousands of years of Egyptian history. But there's no evidence that they actually cared what color your skin was or the skin of your parents. So the question's moot. What mattered to the ancient Egyptians was that you were culturally Egyptian. We already had an in-depth discussion of Nefertiti back in episode 22, so we're not going to repeat that here. But what about Cleopatra? Her name's invoked in this topic perhaps even more frequently than Nefertiti. The last pharaoh of Egypt, Cleopatra VII Philopater, ruled from 51 to 30 BC, in part as a co-regent. As with other members of the Ptolemaic line, her ancestors were Macedonian Greek, descending from Ptolemy I Soter, one of Alexander the Great's generals roughly 300 years earlier. Contemporary to Cleopatra, the Greek historian Strabo suggested that she was the illegitimate daughter of Ptolemy XII Auletes and an Egyptian noblewoman. Alternatively and more popularly, Cleo's mother is thought to have been Cleopatra V Tryphena, among other theories. If her parents were Ptolemy XII and Cleopatra V, that'd be interesting, because each of them in turn is thought to be an illegitimate child of Ptolemy and different Egyptian women. So if Cleopatra's mother herself wasn't Egyptian, then perhaps both her grandmothers were. Or not. Blame the ancient Roman love-hate relationship with Cleopatra for all the confusing and conflicting accounts. What's well attested, however, is that Cleopatra was well accepted and loved by the Egyptian people. She was the first of the Ptolemaic rulers to even bother to learn Egyptian. As with her forebearers, images of her were produced in the traditional Egyptian style when for an Egyptian audience, and in a Greek style for her Greek audience.